Well, hello everyone, Darkside Phil here, and welcome to the end, the official end of Digital Pictures Week. And I know for some of you, you're like, aw, because that was actually some pretty funny, entertaining footage, and some more of you are probably like, thank God, because you really didn't enjoy the footage. And I think really, that's kind of the exact kind of description that you can say for these Digital Pictures full motion video games that came out for Sega CD. It was an era when they were trying something completely new, and there were two groups of people. There were people who said, wow, these games are bad, but they're so bad that they're funny, so that they're actually kind of good. And there was a large group of people that were just like, ugh, like, we don't like this. This is not, it doesn't look fun, it doesn't look entertaining. Again, the whole premise of these is that rather than using graphics or pixels or anything like that to draw stuff, they wanted to actually film movies and make movies interactive. And in some cases, I have to say that actually some of these games actually did a decent job of that. In other cases, I say some of these games failed pretty miserably. Some of these things are probably, you'd be embarrassed to even call them games, because essentially they're not actual games per se. So what I'd like to do is go through them in this final kind of retrospective video, talk a little bit about each game, what I thought about it, and then kind of give my final overall closing to the week on my thoughts about this whole couple years where they really attempted this full motion video. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is actually one I did not play this week, called Double Switch. Oh great, I think I just broke the box. No, it just came off the hinge. But yeah, I did not play Double Switch this week, and this is actually one of the most notable ones out of everything here, because it actually stars Corey Haim, who at the time was just coming out of the 80s as a hot actor. You know, he'd been in a lot of the cult classics of the 80s, and to acquire him for a video game like this was a pretty big acquisition. If anything, he probably thought that he may be on the verge of something, that this kind of full motion video might catch on, and he could be like one of the innovators. Well, I didn't play this game this week. Very simple reason. I already have a playthrough of it that I actually did co-commentary with John Rambo from just a couple months ago. And I said I just played the game and we actually gave it like a full try. This wasn't one that I had played April Fools and I was dicking around. This is when we were actually trying to do well. So if you want to see that playthrough, by all means you can find it if the playlist already exists here on DSPGaming. But all I have to say about this game is it was an interesting experiment, and that the fact that they were trying to actually get real actors, they were trying to put in real sets and props. And by the way, this game plays incredibly close to Night Trap. This game and Night Trap are almost identical when it comes to gameplay, okay? With a very minor differences. Both games, surveillance, you're going through a house looking at different rooms that are basically just running video feeds, and you need to catch certain enemies as they walk into the rooms. If you're not there for certain key scenes to catch certain key enemies, the game will end. And if you don't catch enough enemies, the game will end. So it's pretty much exactly the same gameplay with just a different story premise. Here you're in an apartment building trying to catch like gangsters. In Night Trap you're actually trying to catch monsters and vampires. So, Double Switch, interesting game. If you ever want to delve into the realm of FMV games, I would say that Double Switch is definitely one of the ones you want to check out. Number one, because it's one of the funniest ones. I mean, stupid shit is going on during this game. And it's just absolute hilarity at some point. You're like, what the fuck? Like, they really thought that this was going to fly as like a movie. And the fact that you got Corey Haim in it, it's pretty interesting. So definitely one of the ones worth checking out. Ground Zero Texas. Actually an interesting game. Their attempt at trying to make a shooter similar to, say, Lethal Enforcers with full motion video. I think on some levels it does succeed, and on some levels it fails. For example, the story of a town that gets overrun by doppelganger aliens, and then the aliens are trying to invade later on with a full force like stormtrooper invasion, is kind of cool. And actually when you get to those scenes, those unique scenes of that stuff happening, it's actually pretty entertaining to watch. It's actually interesting. They had a special effects budget. Things were actually exploding. They had stuntmen, so they actually had a budget and were doing, it wasn't just like a cheesy B-movie thing. They were trying to go for like an action movie vibe with the game. Problem, of course, is the gameplay. The gameplay is horrendous and repetitive. All it is you moving a little target across the screen with your Genesis gamepad and shooting things. And that's it. That's all the game is. Shooting things. And Sure, there are games like on-rail shooters that succeed, but usually they're more interesting than this. And the other thing is, because they were limited to the video that they had taken, it's not rendered, stages. You will repetitively and repeatedly fight the same enemies over and over on the same backgrounds over and over. So for this one, I could say one of the most entertaining things to watch the movie clips when you get to them and to have the story kind of be fleshed out. However, the gameplay is atrociously bad and boring and repetitive. Power Factory featuring CNC Music Factory. This is the game that started all the rest of the games that were music games. This was the one that came out first. And first of all I have to say about all the music games is I don't know what they were thinking when they picked them. Like, do you really think that CNC Music Factory is what kids listen to? Keep in mind that back then, in the early 90s, primarily game systems were just for kids. It wasn't like now when adults, kids, teenagers, middle-aged people, everyone seems to be getting into video games. It wasn't like that back then. So to have this to be as a pick as the band that you want to be represented in a music game, really odd. But the whole premise of creating a custom music video using stock footage clips is just odd. Like, who thought that this was something that a kid would want to do? It's not when it comes down to it. And really, the only people that probably bought these games were the people who were fans of these certain bands. I'm a fan of Criss Cross at the time, which actually, I know as hilarious that sounds, but Criss Cross was pretty big at the time. You would go buy their music game and fuck around with the music video or whatever. But outside of that, what is the premise? Like, what is the attraction of this game? Zero. If you don't like the band, of course, zero. So if anything, even though going back and re-experiencing these bands, now obviously 20 years later when they're completely outdated and no one fucking hears from them anymore, it's funny, but the games are shit. Like, there's no quality to this game right now, and so these are probably the worst things that they made for the Sega CD that came out of Digital Pictures, okay? Sewer Shark. Now here's the thing about Sewer Shark. Even though I don't think it's fun, even though I don't think it's entertaining, I kind of have to give Sewer Shark a pass. And I know you're going to say, what? Why would you give Sewer Shark a pass? It's because Sewer Shark was actually made in the 1980s, not in the 1990s. This game was originally made for the Nemo, which was that video cassette-based game system that was never released in the 1980s. So they were very limited with what they could do, okay? You couldn't have as much interactive stuff on a video cassette as you could on a CD. So they probably, limited the game purposely. All this game is you're going through a tube, you're shooting shit, and then you have to make turns that are correct, and that's pretty much it. And then all it becomes is almost like a master run, where the only way you can advance to the further levels of the game is to shoot as little as possible. So now you be pinpoint accurate with your shots, only using one bullet per enemy. I mean, it really was like a perfectionist run game. It was an older school style of game in that regard. It really wasn't much to it. But I do have to say the animation, like the tunnel itself, the animation of the monsters and stuff, not the bats look like shit, but the scorpions and the rats, and the tunnel itself for a 1980s game was pretty groundbreaking that they even got it to look like that. Of course, then they converted it, and this ended up being the first game that was packaged in with the Sega CD, so most people owned this game, and it didn't hold up in the 1990s. But it's a bad game, but I think if this had come out in the 1980s, it would have blown everyone away. Okay? Supreme Warrior. Actually, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best game that Digital Pictures put out, and bear with me, here's why. If you're a fan of Kung Fu movies, Hong Kong style, old school Shaolin monks kind of stuff, this game's probably a hell of a lot of fun for you, because you get to fight a lot of enemies. I think there's 12 enemies total in the game. They all have different fighting styles. The game itself amounts to just QuickTime events, which is fine. If you've played modern games, you're used to QuickTime events, and so you probably do really well. And then it actually does a neat thing by adding in some of the abilities and powers that you actually get as you play the game, and you can figure out when is the best time during the game to use those powers. So it's not only a QuickTime event, but it's a QuickTime event with power-ups. which is actually kind of an interesting premise. Now, of course, for a playthrough, no, this isn't very good. You see me fight each opponent once or twice, and that's fun, but after that, if I continually challenge the same guy over and over and over because I can't beat him, obviously that's not good for footage, but this is actually a fun game. I had a lot of fun playing Supreme Warrior, and if I had more time, I probably would have kept playing it, and I probably would have kept trying to beat the third boss that I was on before I got to the final boss. And I actually think this is one of the best, like when you're thinking what to do with well, how would we do a fighting game with full motion video? This would be it. Make it a quick time event game, and it's actually really interesting. One of my favorites for the system right here. Not going to say too much about this one simply because it's another music video game. Again, if you were a fan of this band, you're in excess, you probably liked the game. One thing that's kind of funny though is that people were commenting on the video and they were like, we can't figure out why they chose these 3 INXS songs because they actually had much bigger, more popular hits that probably would have resonated a lot better than these 3. So it was just bad song choice in this case. But it is what it is. Again, as I said, pretty limited. One of the worst games that they made for digital pictures. I don't know why they did it. Now this one threw me for a loop, okay? Kids on Site. I thought that this game was going to be like an educational game to teach kids numbers and letters, you know. It's almost what it looks like on the front. On the front, you got guys holding up numbers and stuff, and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be that kind of game where it tries to teach kids educational shit, maybe with some full motion video. Completely freaking wrong. All it does is have you control 4 pieces of heavy construction machinery, which, first of all, why would you even tell a kid that that's like a good idea? I'd be like, no, you should never do this, it's dangerous. They jump in, and then they make fun of like the idea that you're doing it. Like you're driving a bulldozer. Oh, just go over and bulldoze this pile of cans that there's all these workers standing in front of. And the workers cartoonishly will get knocked over or get flattened, like literally like in a Bugs Bunny cartoon. And you're like, wow, if you were a kid, a little kid, and you were playing this game, you would get completely the wrong impressions. Oh, who cares? Just go to a construction site, jump on a machine, and start swinging it at people. There's no danger here. I mean, in today's world, this game would never fly, but in the early 1990s, before everything became massively politically correct, this is actually a pretty funny game. And actually, of all the playthroughs I did this week, I think this is actually one of the most funny. And if you're looking for like, which videos should I watch? I'm not going to watch all of them, but maybe I want to pick or choose 1 or 2 games. This is probably one of the ones you should watch. It's pretty fucking funny, okay? Slam City, I've talked about many times before. This was actually one of my first April Fool's videos from way back in 2009. Was it 2009? Or it could have been 2010. I think actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it was probably 2010. Saying that this was the best basketball game of all time. Completely the opposite. It's quite literally the worst basketball game ever created, simply because none of the essence of basketball is present. The whole basketball is constantly about movement, action, shooting, passing, stealing. This game is nothing like that because you're so limited by the full motion video that all you do is see the same loops of guy, oh, I'm going to defend, and then you'll randomly have to see that one opening where the game allows you to either run and dunk or shoot the ball. It's horrible. It's nothing like real basketball. Poor Scottie Pippen getting the endorsement for this game, putting his stamp on it, actually being in the game, in the video of the game, and then the game ending up to be so shitty, very disappointing. I think it had potential to be great full motion video basketball, and they just couldn't figure out how to make it work. It's horrible, okay? This game's shit. Not even say any more about it. Fuck Crisscross. They always sucked ass. Prizefighter. Now this game is really unique because actually the director of the fight scenes of Raging Bull and Rocky directed this game. And so when you watch it, outside of even the fighting, but when you're watching it, it's in black and white. It's got that film quality, like, oh, it's an old school movie. You feel like you're a part of an interactive like Raging Bull or Rocky. That's really what it feels like when you're playing the game. That being said, the game is extremely similar, actually, to Supreme Warrior, where it's just QuickTime events. It's you fighting full motion video of boxers, and through QuickTime events, hitting them in certain different ways. Now, there's some uniqueness to this because as you beat opponents, you actually get what are called power-up points, and you use them to level up your hands and your health, your stamina. And so, as you fight these guys, you can realize, oh, I usually can hit him a lot with my left, so you'll power up your left hand, and you'll be able to kill him or beat him a lot more easily. So in that regard, the game's actually a little bit interesting. A full motion video game with, again, with power-ups similar to how Supreme Warrior had. Problem being, the final guy in the game is retardedly hard. The game actually cheats, meaning if you knock him down, he can get back up, just like in a real boxing match. But if he ever knocks you down, you never get back up. It's an instant loss. So it's completely lopsided and unfair. I don't know why they did that. I mean, I can understand, okay, the last guy's challenging, but the last guy actually cheating and having it be completely unfair in your favor, that's kind of silly. And it's frustrating because I did play this game for over an hour, and I finally trapped to the last guy trying to beat him, and I tried like for a half hour, and I didn't even come close. Really ridiculous what they did with the end of this game. I think that Prizefighter is interesting because of the way that they directed it, because they got the director of, you know, those fight scenes from those classic boxing movies, and for that it's noteworthy. But I think that Supreme Warrior actually attempts, or takes what they're attempting to do here and does it much, much better. So in that regards, I really don't think it's a very good game. Okay? The game that I'm sure Mark Wahlberg wished never was made. In fact, I'm sure he probably wishes that none of this ever happened. But then again, it did lead to his imminent success as an actor, and now he's a successful producer. I don't know if people know this. He produces some of the most successful series and things ever. Big movies he produces. Contraband, which made a lot of money. Boardwalk Empire, which is huge on HBO right now. He produces that. So he's making a shit ton of money because he basically had a really stupid early beginning career as a young John Cena. So, hilarious game to play, that's for sure. If you're looking for the best music video I did all week, it's definitely Marky Mark. You're going to want to watch those, especially part 6, which is the last part. I put in my all and tried to really do a good music video, and I think that one came out great, so check it out. But Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, horrible game. Again, the last of the music video games, a horrible idea. Getting down to the end here, Corpse Killer, all I have to say is this. In this case, unlike Ground Zero Texas, they tried to make an on-rails shooter game where there's a little bit more control. You can move from area to area, and when you go from area to area, you choose what you're going to fight. You try to get power-ups by going to area, like health power-ups, special bullets. It's unique in that regards. I don't think I've ever played an on-rails shooter that lets you go around collecting items and stuff. Along the same lines as that, the game is quite literally unplayable without a light gun because of the flaws of the game design. You've got zombies that will attack you from two sides of the screen at once, and there's no way you can have your target go from here, shoot this zombie, and then end up over here before that zombie hits you. It's impossible. So it's pretty obvious they wanted you to use the Menacer, which is the light gun for the Genesis, but that doesn't mean the game should be unplayable. All they needed to do is make the target pointer move a little bit faster, and the game would have been a lot better. They completely fucked it up, basically. So there's also major flaws in the game design when it comes to the power-ups. There are certain enemies in this game you cannot kill unless you get special bullets. The problem is, you'll probably never get those special bullets because it's a choice between either getting those or health power-ups, and you're always going to need health because you're always getting hit by these zombies who you can't shoot at the same time. So really, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Then there's also this other ability, it's called a Juju Stick, and you get it by beating a certain part of the game, a certain map. And every time you go to the map, you have to replay it and shoot all the zombies in that area. Well, when you go to get the Juju Stick that protects you from this certain kind of zombie, that certain kind of zombie attacks you like 20 times during that stage. So even if you get the Juju Stick, when you go back, you're going to use it immediately because the first zombie comes out, and then you don't have enough to fend off the rest of the zombies, and you can't even kill those zombies. So it just makes no sense. There's innate flaws in the game design of this game. I could see what they were going for, like a B-movie vibe, but they just horrible. Everything, the makeup's horrible, the gameplay's horrible. This is by far the worst game out of all the Sega CD games that we played from Digital Pictures. This is the fucking stinker. Okay, so last, but certainly not least, the cult hit Night Trap. The one that caused all the hoopla, the one that actually caused games to have this rating symbol on it, even though the game isn't scary, isn't gory, isn't adult-oriented at all. A small child could play this game. There's nothing scary about it. But what ended up happening was there was this era when In particular, Senator Joe Lieberman thought that he was going to make a name for himself by standing up and saying, oh, this emerging media of video games that's becoming more popular is becoming too adult-oriented. All he did, I tell you right now, he watched 5 seconds of someone playing Mortal Kombat where Sub-Zero rips the spine out of the guy in his fatality, and he said, oh, that's unacceptable. He never played the games, he never understood the context of the games. One of the games that he cited in his war against video games and trying to censor video games was this game, and he said that the game was all about trying to kill young women and it had excessive gore and violence. The game has no gore, no violence, it's cartoonish in nature, and the game you're trying to protect the women and not hurt them. So he's a fucking asshole. He's an asshole. Like, think about it. This is a guy who people repeatedly vote in as a senator for Connecticut when it was proven in the 90s that he has no fucking clue what he's talking about, and he constantly talks out of his ass, but people still get fooled by his smokescreen and vote for him. So, ridiculous, but it ended up actually leading to the games being rated during the 1990s. As a game, what do I have to say about it? Well, it's interesting because, again, it's the same premise, basically, the exact same premise as Double Switch. Some people are in this house, some guys are in the house trying to get them and kidnap them or hurt them or kill them. It's your job to go around the house catching these guys so that that doesn't happen, use surveillance systems and set traps to catch them. And it's actually interesting because if you go around the house, you can watch the story unfold, and of course you lose the game if you do that, which is kind of a major flaw of the game. Why, if I'm watching the story, am I losing the game? Because you're not catching the other guys that are throughout the house at the same time. But the story's kind of interesting, and over the first half hour of the game you figure out, oh gee, so basically what's happening here, it's a family of vampires. Yeah, I know, kind of far-fetched, but it's a family of vampires who regularly trap young people in the house and use them to basically harvest their blood, okay? And then there's this lesser group of vampire monster things called augurs that they kind of, I guess they're higher class vampires, this family, and so they feel bad for the lower class augurs, and they regularly donate blood to them. So the story is that some kids show up, the parent vampires leave to go donate blood to the augurs, but at the same time, the augurs break into the house and are trying to capture everyone and steal all the blood. So, really weird plot. I mean, let's face it, who the fuck thought that up? Probably Tom Zito. Well, whoever the fuck thought that up is a fucking maniac, okay? But the game somehow surprisingly has this camp value to it that is actually kind of funny. And when you watch this teenage girl picks up a tennis racket and she's singing into it and playing it like a guitar, and you're going around the house and you're catching these dudes in full body like leather outfits, they're getting thrown through the walls and caught and blown up, it's actually kind of entertaining. So oddly enough, even though the game is very basic and the premise is so fucking outlandish and crazy, the game's kind of fun to play. And I could see this being one of the games that if you really thought that there was a funny story, you grab a notepad, you'd write down in the bedroom at 8 minutes and 40 seconds there will be a guy I need to catch. And you'd make a listing, detailed listing, line by line of the times and places to go, and you just catch everyone in the house after playing this for a couple hours of memorization, and you could probably beat the whole game. So, an interesting game. Funny that this game caused so much controversy when there was absolutely nothing controversial about it. In fact, the game's just kind of very campy and silly. And but definitely one of the ones you probably want to play if you get a Sega CD. So, as you can see, all the games... Ah, shit, they all just toppled over. All these games are different. They tried to do sports games. They tried to do, on-rail shooters. One of the games has a sci-fi fling. One of them has a horror fling. They tried to do games with actors like Corey Haim, like known actors. If you saw Prizefighter, a couple of the people in that are known actors as well. So it's very interesting what they were trying to do. They were trying to create a new genre almost of gaming with movie footage in it and show that it can appeal to all different kinds of audiences. A kid would play Kids on Sight. You know, an older kid might play one of them, Night Trap or maybe Supreme Warrior. If you're into like the boxer movies like Raging Bull or Rocky, maybe you'd get into Prizefighter. They're really trying to appeal to a wide audience. It's interesting to see that they've actually diversified themselves so much. But it's not hard to see why full motion video didn't really catch on. First of all, the technology was too limited at the time. Even though, for the first time, they were storing these games on CDs, you could still tell. Look at the quality of the video. It's pixely as fuck. Like, if you want full motion video, it should be as good as what I watch on my TV. And it wasn't. It was actually lower quality, degraded video that they had to downgrade to fit onto these CDs. You know what I would love to see? I would love to see the original video for some of these games. Like, I would love to watch Night Trap as a movie, an hour-and-a-half movie of everything going around in the house in high definition. I would buy that. I would actually buy that. And I think that's really what some of these things that could have been good. Like, they were trying to make movies interactive, but it didn't catch on because, number one, the interactivity wasn't enough in a lot of cases. I mean, let's face it, in Night Trap, all you're doing is going from room to room and pressing a button. That's it. That's not gameplay, okay? In Supreme Warrior, the game's kind of good, but it becomes just a diluted QuickTime event, because what else are you going to do with these movie clips? There wasn't enough interactivity. I think today, if you were to make games like this, it would actually be a lot better. So, for example, if you were to make a game like this today, and you know, there could be a lot more choices. They could film 20 different scenarios, and depending on what you do in that situation, a different scenario unfolds. And of course, the video quality would be high definition, and I'm sure they could probably get, you know, bigger actors to do this kind of stuff. But at the time that they tried it, I don't think the technology was there yet. The technology was not ready to take, you know, full quality video and put it into a video game. And that's why, as you saw, and as we talked about, the videos that these games tried to make themselves out of then actually became the intro videos. You know what I mean? Let's look at Resident Evil. It has full motion video at the beginning. It's a cheesy B-movie, campy intro to the game, but it's fun as hell too. And they did this with a lot of those early era PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn, you know, those kind of games had those full motion video cutscenes and intros, and that's eventually what ended up happening with this kind of filming and this kind of product. So it's interesting that they attempted to do it. It was a hell of an endeavor. I mean, Sega of America took a huge gamble and probably pissed away a shit ton of money with this gamble. Another thing that really killed it is the fact that Sega of America was going nuts at the time. They had the Genesis. We wanted people to keep buying the Genesis, so then they would give the Sega CD. Then they did the Model 2 Genesis, the Model 2 Sega CD. Now you got the 32X you plug on top. By the way, the Sega Saturn's coming out 6 months later. So it's like, within a span of 3 years, anyone who was buying Sega stuff got completely fucked over. They spent a retarded amount of money, and then when the Saturn came out, they completely abandoned the Genesis as a whole, and anyone who had bought all those attachments and things got completely fucked. So if that hadn't been happening, and they had actually supported the format longer, maybe there would have been more interest. But you can't take a gamble like this and then not follow through, and that's what happened. Sega actually dropped the whole thing and just gave up on it, and because of that, it never re-emerged, really. That whole era of these games, also being on the Philips CDI and the 3DO, all these initial CD-based systems all failed massively, which is kind of funny because some of the other ones, like the 3DO, cost something like $699 when it first came out and ended up being a fucking piece of shit. So imagine being like a techie or a first adopter, and you're really excited because everyone's announcing the new generation of video games is going to have movies in it, and you really, oh wow, 3DO, $600-700, and it's fucking super expensive, but I'm going to be the cool person who has this, and I'm going to have next generation technology, and the thing lasts like a year and a half, no good games come out for it, and the next thing you know, they've already moved on to other systems. You know, at that point you had the PlayStation, the Sega Saturn, and the Nintendo 64 that already taken over and made all that shit obsolete, and you were left sitting there with a $700 paperweight. You're like, duh. So, an interesting era in time. As I said, I feel like this was something that needed to be tackled and needed to be tried out. You had to see if you could make movies into games or make games out of movies, however you want to say it. They tried it. It didn't work. Lucky for us, we don't have this kind of stuff anymore. Now we have fully rendered graphics, voice actors who are acting as the characters in the game rather than having actual actors on film doing this kind of stuff. Could have completely changed things in Hollywood, could have completely changed the face of games. But we've been there, done that, it's over with, and I'm glad to say Digital Pictures Week for me was fun. It was something I wanted to do, but I'm glad it's over. This is an era now that I think we can shut the door on. We can say we've explored it, we've experienced it, and it had to happen. It's funny, but it was not worth it, and it's time to move on to bigger and better things. So that's it for Digital Pictures Week. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you haven't watched a lot of the videos because you were turned off by them, I would definitely recommend you check out a couple the funnier ones like Kids on Site. I said it was definitely one of the... God damn it, I ran out of time. As I was closing the video, I ran out of time and the video ended, so I had to add this little last piece on. But, yeah, definitely check out the music videos in particular. I think the Marky Mark one's pretty good, and Kids on Site. And here and there, like I said, I think Ground Zero Texas in parts, it's kind of entertaining. Supreme Warrior in parts, especially if you're a Kung Fu Shaolin Monks fan, that's going to be a cool one to check out. And Night Trap, obviously, for its campy appeal. But for the most part, these games are severely outdated at this point. And yeah, I knew that viewership wasn't going to be so hot this week, which it honestly wasn't. But it's a filler week. I wanted, like I said, I've always wanted to experience these games, to try them out. And just to get it done. It's done. It's in the history books. Let's put a nail in the coffin and move on to other stuff. So, thanks a lot for tuning in this week for Digital Pictures Week. I'm Darkside Phil, and I'll see you for different and interesting gameplay coming up. Thanks.